Good evening. I'd like to call the City Council work session meeting to order. And I would like, the first item of business is the work session on culture, parks, and the recreation project. I would like to call on Parks Director Susan Muir to present the topic.
Thank you. We're back to respond to your January 28th work session, and that was such a helpful conversation for us to hear where you needed more information, what your thoughts and impressions were. It was just really helpful for us to check in with you. Last time I didn't have the whole team here, and I want to introduce the team to you. They're in the front row here. This is Steve Ganser, who's the rec sports manager. Katie Noyd is next to him. She's the community center manager. Senior center manager Erin Gwynn is there, and as you all know, our retiring aquatic center manager, Rob Porter. And then from the Public Works Department, a critical partnership that we have with them is David Renshaw, who manages the Parks Maintenance Group. So when we talk about building maintenance and all that, these are the folks right here in the green hoodies that are doing most of the work in that regard, but we do appreciate the partnership from Public Works and Gianni, our new facilities maintenance person. So the first thing I wanted to do, I think this was addressed mostly by the testimony, but I did want to just communicate how important our senior center is to the older adults in our community. We have almost 2,000 people come through our doors a month. We have as many as 95 people at our music and mocktail events, for example. That Music and Mocktails is one of our largest events. We have waiting lists for our programs. We offer fitness, lectures, socials, personal services, coffee hours, Parkinson's, and caregiver support and movement classes. It's a really, really critical part to the network for older adults in the support system that we have. So, like I said, I think that was mostly discussed during the public testimony piece, but I did want to put that out there, what the scope of that building is. It's true if you go over there anytime after we close at 4:30 or 4, you might not see very many cars in the parking lot associated with the senior center. However, during the daytime, the joint is rocking. So I'll invite many of you to some of the future upcoming events where we have plenty of people there so you can see how it operates when it's popular and full. Okay. Moving on to the work session, the purpose tonight is to provide information and respond to some of the issues brought up during the January 22nd work session. I answered a lot of them in the staff report, and hopefully you all had a chance to look at that, but I'm going to go through most of them tonight as well. And I am not going to give the whole background on the project since 2019. I've done that before. Everybody's heard it. But I do want to, for the community or new people, if you go to iheartmac.org, you can find all of the information that's listed there. I have a link to the council packet for this meeting, and we'll post follow-up there as well. So iheartmac.org is your go-to. And then at your place, I put a new tool that we have, which after your last work session, I realized you have to go to a lot of different places on our webpage and a lot of different historical city council meetings to get some of the information together. And so we tried to put it in a handy, easy to read kind of history booklet for everybody, and I'm happy to give more copies of that if anybody wants to hand those out, but that's a new resource, and hopefully it just sort of gives the facts and the history and the dates and kind of what we've been through. The work session agenda for tonight, I'm going to go through the financial history and context. I kind of grouped all of your comments into 4 main categories. The financial history and context was a big one. I've broken that down into debt and issuing bonds, cost estimates, and then the how we got here question. I'll talk a little bit about partnerships. We'll move into location and phasing, and then talk about next steps. So, moving right along, let's start with the financial history and context. What I heard you say about the debt and issuing bonds is a little small, but we know you need more information about the timing of and information about the city's existing debt and what that looks like, how the timing and phasing of issuing bonds works, how the bond issuance timing and amount translates to the annual property taxes assessed, and then just an overview of current property taxes for McMinnville taxpayers. Now, the good news is I'm not qualified to talk about all of those things. However, our new finance director, our municipal advisor, and our bond counsel are. I've given them these questions, and we're going to prep We are coming back to you on April 8th for a work session on that. And if there's any additional questions you want us to add to the April 8th work session and try and address those, we would be happy to do that. You can either let me know now or you can email me later, but April 8th is going to be your opportunity to have the experts talking to you about city debt and how that works and the timing and all of that.
I assume we'll have, by that point, an idea of what Chemeketa is now coming and asking for.
We may have that tonight.
So their board took action last week to place the bond measure on the May election this year. It's the same bond measure, $140 million that they had on the November bond. And you'll also have a presentation from President Howard and I think a member, either a member of their board or the member of their PAC, tentatively scheduled for your first meeting in March.
Good question. There's a lot of conversation out there right now. Anything else? And again, you can email either me or Katie Henry if you have questions about the debt work session in April. Okay, so there's been some conversation about cost estimates, and I know Councilor Chenoweth is online. There's been some discussion about the number of estimates we have and what they're used for, and so I just thought I'd spell that out clearly. There are 3 that we've looked at over the last 6 years of the project. The first one was the 2019 facility condition assessments. Sometimes we call that the FCAs, facility condition assessments. Those were done to every city facility. Every single one of them. I think there were 57 maybe that were looked at. And so that's one of the first numbers. The second one was the 2020 Phase 1 feasibility study. And for those of you that were on city council at that time, that was the meeting that we had in the second floor of the community center. And so that was a special meeting that you had up there, and we unveiled those numbers. And then the third is the 2022 MACPAC report. So I'm going to walk you through what each of those are. The 2019 facility condition assessment really looked at the building systems. It also looked at the building envelopes, and it mapped out a 20-year plan with cost estimates for ongoing maintenance of the existing systems and facilities. I looked up what the first 3 projects were, I think, for the community center, and it was fixing a stucco wall on the outside, repointing bricks, and then we know we have some HVAC work to do. So that is kind of what the 2019 facility condition assessments looked at. And again, the number for the 20-year plan was the full 20, what the dollar amount would be for the full 20 years of that maintenance plan.
Just to clarify, that assessment was sort of over the next 20 years, this is the investment required to maintain this facility you have, to keep the lights on, to keep it in healthy working condition, this, that, and the other. Not improve anything, not get that elevator you always needed, not to, do any of the bigger things. That's a sort of standard assumption percentage of investment on a building of that size and scale.
Essentially, yes, and David Renshaw has much more knowledge about those facility condition assessments. The only clarification I would make is it probably did have a replacement schedule for the elevator, and one of the things that you just mentioned, which is today, because the elevator isn't working, and hasn't been working as we wait for a part, but it was maintaining and replacing those systems and what type of a cycle it should be on. So, and David, if I start to get out of line here, feel free to step up, but if you're supposed to replace a commercial toilet every 10 years, it had that in there. So it was replacing the existing systems.
Maybe the elevator would be more apropos in the aquatics that are not adding an elevator to the aquatic.
Exactly.
Got it.
Not
Understood.
adding. Correct. So it did not address ADA issues or seismic issues, program expansion, additions, or growth. So that was really we know we've been sort of having challenges financially with building maintenance, so that was sort of our starting point across all city facilities.
How long ago prior to 2019 was a facility condition assessment done?
Boy, I started here in 2017, and I've never seen anything for those buildings,
So
David.
2019, at least in our generation. 2005? Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, good questions. Let me move on to the next set of numbers, and that was what we called the 2020 Phase 1 feasibility study. And there was a lot of information in there, but related to the cost estimates, that one was strictly looking at the Aquatic Center, Community Center, and Senior Center. And it was a real rough estimate to figure out what could we expect to spend in updating some of those buildings, and compared that to replacement. And what they looked at in the replacement, it was as if that renovated building fell down one day and we had to rebuild it exactly as is. So it was really looking at new construction costs related to remodeling. It did look at some of the ADA issues. It was a pretty conceptual estimate, so it didn't have floor plans like the MacPac one did. It didn't have, sizes of expansions or anything. So that was sort of the next piece of information that we had to make decisions to go forward. And then ultimately, the thing we've probably talked about the most is the 2022 MacPac report. And that was all new or fixed systems. It had growth in our programs. Clearly, accessibility issues were addressed. The locational issues and lack of parking and safety that we have at some of our sites, particularly the community center, were addressed in there. And then this is where the new library was wrapped in. The library is wrapped into the project, and we also proposed some updates to the senior center. So this was the bigger recommendation that went through the community group, and we put some cost estimates to that. So when we talk about cost estimates, there's 3 of them, and they were all used at different times for different answers. And so the cautions I want to put out there about the cost estimates is each one of those 3 served a very different purpose. Each one was done at a different time for different construction timelines. Some were prorated for 20 years at 3%, and some were not. And so I'm pointing this out because I want to make sure we don't unintentionally use numbers that were created for a different assignment and make those numbers fit a question that we have now. I do have a way we can answer those questions that we have now, but I just want to make sure we're all going into these existing numbers with our eyes wide open. They should be considered planning level estimates, like a 5-year forecast or a 10-year forecast. And then the other caution is how much volatility has occurred in the construction market, particularly in the last few years. I think before the last few years, people were using anywhere from 3 to 6%, and in fact, 21 was 8% and 22 was 12%. That's what the estimators that work for the architect that we use indicated, and so I just want to put that out there that we can get new numbers. So what was in there, actually, and I apologize that's not as bright as it should be, but the 2019 Facility Condition Assessment, like I mentioned, it mapped out the 20-year maintenance budget and plan, and you can see the numbers up there and what came out of it. It was a lot over the 20 years. That data has been used to inform overall city facilities conversations, so much broader than Parks and Recreation. We've used it to inform the executive team capital budget conversations, which we do once a year before we bring the budget forward to you. And then knowing we had to do something after we got the results of the facility condition assessment, that data really led us to putting a proposal forward to council to say, let's fund a study where we can look at the feasibility of those buildings and rehabbing them, or what we need to do with those. So that's what the facility condition assessment numbers have been used for so far.
So in the aquatic center, would a new roof fall under this one, or would it fall under the kind of the one in between of like rehabbing it or whatever?
Good question. It would fall under both. It would not fall under the MacPac one, obviously, because we're proposing a new building there, but it would be included in this as the facility condition assessment, and then we did wrap that into the renovation potential costs and building new.
Okay, so this 4.3 includes a new roof to that facility?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And that is 2019 point-in-time numbers.
They were escalated, but again, they were escalated at, I think,
3%
3% per year, and we would want new numbers for that, absolutely. The 2020 Phase 1 feasibility study, this is, again, we were just looking at the 3 buildings and looked roughly at renovation and new. We did have a public outreach component of this, and we use that to determine, really rank and prioritize what the community would want to see in the renovation. So we're starting to actually see kind of what would we want in these buildings with a renovation. And then the architect, in order to give the city council some options, like I said, compared that number with new construction of the exact same thing. And so you can see for the aquatic center, the renovation cost would be 21 million, building new would be 27 million. Going back to the conversation that the city council had on this, and those of you that were there that might remember, this was the ability to say, okay, how much more are we going to be spending on new construction? And if we're going to be spending that much, should we ask the community, what do you want for the next 20 years? And council was presented with 3 options at that meeting, and clearly everybody said option 2, to proceed ahead with 1 new building, was the desired direction. And part of that was also because we thought there would be operational savings with 1 building, and you all have talked about this a little bit. We did anticipate, operating 1 counter instead of 2 counters. Really centralizing stuff into 1 building would be more efficient for us in terms of operating costs. And then there was also the community bonus of a one-stop shop for most recreation. Councilor Chenoweth has a question.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry while I clear my throat. So you're saying the renovation cost on this slide is to renovate basically to something that has similar features and similar facilities and capability as what we would build new as well?
This was before the MacPac recommendation, so I wouldn't say that it did the full kind of dream big scenario or look at growth of the future. So it didn't get quite that far, but it was a renovation to improve the buildings.
Okay.
And this is where I think getting new numbers for some of the information would be a really good thing, and I can continue to talk about that a little bit.
Let me repeat my question because I'm not sure I asked that right. I'm saying, my question is the renovation here and the new here on this, just on this slide, I'm not thinking of what the MacPac came up with, but the items that are listed on these 2 are to build equal buildings, 1 renovating our existing one, the other one building from scratch, but the 2 at the end result would be the same.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Council President, I have a question. Director Muir, thank you. Since this was done in 2020, I presume this doesn't include the cost of the Miller property?
The Phase 1 feasibility study did not include any property costs. That came up in the MacPac estimate.
This only is what it takes to construct. It doesn't take to acquire any greenfield.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
On the new scenario, it was just rebuilding where it is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the table, we're talking about just the facilities listed, and I think 152 million has become shorthand for the total cost of the bond we've talked about to date. So knowing that 152 million includes parks, 10 million for parks, and 22 million, 20-ish million for the library is sort of above and beyond what we're looking at here. So when we total these up, we need to be thinking about just totaling those particular pieces of that project across, not measuring this against 150.
That's correct.
Okay.
But also, though, just for a point of clarification, when you add 27 million to 39 million, you don't get the MacPac building, right? Like,
Oh, correct.
that is just if those buildings came straight down to the ground, we built in place basically the same building, but it's not apples to apples when it comes to the MacPac building itself.
Correct, but it's closer than the 152. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why comparing these numbers with each other is really tricky, because they have different things included in them. They have different timelines. So hopefully this can get some clarification. And then, like I said, I think we have some ways to get you all maybe different information and different data that might help you going forward.
Susan? The cost to construct an aquatic center and community center are kind of enumerated out into separate line items. Do you have an estimate for whether there's cost savings by combining those two things into a single building?
We did, as part of this study, there was a real rough staffing plan and a real rough operating budget. And I think the estimate there was one full FTE, because we use a lot of part-time people for the counter, would be the FTE savings. And then if I remember correctly, I'd have to look this up, I think there were some operational savings as well.
Yeah, so to follow up, what I was meaning was the construction cost. I assume constructing two buildings would be more expensive.
Yes.
than-
I can barely hear him.
It's the bane of my existence, Zoom. Thanks, Chris, for pointing that out. So do you have a sense of the efficiencies of combining these into two buildings versus one in terms of the construction costs?
I would say we have numbers that you could compare, but they would not be apples to apples. So it'd be a little bit of a guesstimate.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we have the backpack recommendation. And again, this number I'm putting here does not include the library or the parks, because I was trying to keep it as apples to apples as I could. But this was the recommendation that came forward from the Community Advisory Group. This has been used to potentially shape the GO bond and the conversations that we've been having so far. It was the starting point for scaling for MacPac, so I'll go through that. They also offered a couple of other recommendations of different scales of development. And then this was some of the information that we used for the May 24 and the November 24 polling. So that's the cost estimate in the MacPac recommendation. And again, these are not scaled for the actual inflation that occurred since we did these. Just another caution on that. So any questions on the cost estimates? And this is also where, if you want a different type of cost estimate, and Councilor Chenoweth and I had an email exchange today, we'd be happy to get those for you.
Yeah, I think, I guess the big part of the selling point is how we're going from, rough math here, $66 million to $111 million. That, it's not it's not exactly double, but it's within the range of being double, or at least when you look at those numbers. So I guess for me, as we move forward with flushing this out, is what are we telling to our community that they're getting for that $50 million more than just rebuilding the buildings in their space?
Yeah, and that does come up a lot. What are we getting for it? I can tell you, because of the different timelines and the different processes we used, the MacPac recommendation, I can list out what's in there. The earlier, we didn't have that level of detail in terms of what would we be converting space to and other things. So, yeah. And I see Councilor Chenoweth has his hand up again.
Yeah, I would just like to express, first off, I appreciate you have been great at responding to questions, and I want to acknowledge that. You've been great at communicating with me, and I want to acknowledge that. I don't think you guys get as much credit as you deserve for the work that you do, so thank you. I would like to put out there, I would advocate for 3 pieces of information that I would like to see, and I think I expressed that in the email, but I want to make sure that that discussion's had here. The first piece of information is another, basically, facilities assessment, what it would cost to bring the two structures, the aquatic center and the community center, and maybe even the senior center in the same discussion, to completely repaired, all ADA met, and all seismic requirements met. Because that's, to me, a base level of what those buildings ought to be. And completely repaired, for me, when I say that's all maintenance that should be done. That means the carpets in the rooms of the community center being redone. You know, all of the necessary maintenance that should have been done heretofore caught up, and the building up to a status of functioning, all three of those buildings. So that would be one level I'd like to see. And then I'd like to see the other two levels that you've already had. I mean, we've kind of got the MacPac level, but then the one in between, which is what we saw in 2020 or 2022. Am I clear? Does that make sense?
I think for the, just one question about the 2022, do you mean the scaled recommendation from MacPac?
No,
Okay.
I mean the one that compares. I'd like to see that one. Yes.
Updated,
In new numbers that are realistic with today's construction costs.
okay.
Because I feel like, you know, as counselor, I don't know which counselor it was because I can't see faces and I'm going by voices, but I think it was Cunningham, just said, the sale for him was going from this to MacPac. The sale for me is going from maintaining what we have to this to MacPac. You got three different points that are points that I think the community that I've spoken to wants to understand. Why can't we repair what we've got? They want that answer. And so providing them the thought process of why we're going from repair to this or from repair to brand new is a discussion point I think that would be helpful for me to make a decision on which way to go.
And I think, Counselor, if I may, I think what I heard from you earlier too today is a line-by-line itemized cost list would be beneficial so that you can see we wouldn't be looking back here and saying, oh, what we know is it was a renovation, but we don't know exactly the size of the rooms. But if you had a line-by-line cost
Yes.
estimate, that would be more helpful.
Yeah, because I don't know what does renovation mean.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, am I getting a gym that's been completely gutted and replaced and is now capable of supporting 45 pickleballers? I'm just obviously not. It's not that big, but you understand what I'm saying. I don't know what this means. So yes, that would be great.
Yeah, and just to be clear, these were real rough planning numbers, but I think the next step is to take them to the next step in terms of getting a better recommendation with the specifics in it.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Renshaw, do you know, I'm guessing because I would think the numbers would be much higher, to adequately earthquake retrofit the community center, was that a part of those renovation numbers? The repair, I guess that was the fourth.
No, sir, it wasn't. They did a seismic study, basically made the point, I just read it the other day again, made the point that it's not up to seismic standards, but didn't provide any cost estimates. And I know there was some seismic work done at the community center many years ago, back in the 90s, I think. But currently, it's not up to current. So we'd have to find those numbers for you.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess the easiest thing I would try to figure out is there another building of its size and scope in Oregon that had that work actually done to it?
And I
That
would
could
say
be another day. No.
Yeah, I would say, I think if we want to start looking at construction cost budgets, we should get a new study, and that's not a problem. Yeah, because anything that's been done in the past isn't going to have had those accelerated inflationary rates, and that is a very unique building. So I think we can get it for you.
Counselor Payne, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Council President. Does Chris have this book? It's the pros plan resolution, like the whole.
Adopted.
Yeah.
Everybody has access to it online.
Sure.
You happen to come to my office and get a paper copy, and anybody can have that.
I use it all the time.
Good.
I look at it all the time. So I did have a question about, kind of as we're getting into costs, so in the table 5-6 for the short-term action planning that lists out kind of like the parks and parklets, if these cost numbers are reflective of inflation as well.
They were accurate at the time that they were completed, which would have been
June 25th, 24?
Well, I think the consultant put them together a little bit before that. And again, I would say those are really good for planning numbers. But I think if you asked anybody on the Public Works team, they would say the one thing we need to do is tighten those up when we're ready to build something.
These aren't 2019 numbers, though.
No.
Okay.
They're since then, and that's one of the questions that I'm going to answer a little bit
Okay,
later on, too.
thank you.
I have a question related to conversation on the dais. What is the benefit to hiring a consultant to estimate the cost of the project as opposed to putting a project to multiple bids?
Did you say putting a project to multiple?
Bids.
Oh, so we need to know what we're going to build if we go out to bid with a construction or a CMGC. It is a rougher estimate right now if we just go with an architect and say, hey, can you give us an estimate on this? But I would say until we're sure what dollar amount we want to build, some of those conversations are better just informally. I can call a couple of developers and, I'm keeping in touch with, for example, Happy Valley, who is building a new facility, and I'm checking with them to find out what their cost estimates are coming in per square foot. So we're kind of checking those things. But unless we're ready to actually set a budget, I would hold off on going out to bid.
Right. So the purpose of the consultant report as part of that process going forward would be?
I would just say it's more of an update to some of the numbers that you have. I think I'd need to look into purchasing with our city attorney and make sure I either need to go out to get that information, just rough estimates from an architect, or if we're updating under our previous work. But essentially what it would do is give you more specifics in terms of what's in the renovation. It could give us line by line details of, what would it cost to add a family changing room at the current aquatic center or an elevator. We could get to those level of planning dollars. But you're right, and like I said, this is what cities building these buildings right now are doing. They have preliminary designs. They go out for a bid for a contractor or CMGC. They get to 30% drawings and find out it's actually gone up. And then they start right-sizing it with the architect and the contractor right there. So I think this is just sort of an iterative process that we need to go through. And the first thing is to get you all an estimate of what a renovation would look like. But at this point, and I think I'll ask this at the end, I want to make sure that I'm proceeding ahead with the consensus of the council and what you all would like us to do and to provide to you. And so looking for that information as we go through this as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, and to that end, I'd feel comfortable with a sort of a uniform table that is all updated, modernized numbers. Okay, we made a step forward and picked a path based on 2019 model numbers that had sound logic, but we need to check what those numbers are now and understand how that relates to now. Then we did a 2020 assessment that had another round of numbers to give us another decision point. We're going to update and modernize those numbers so we can understand retroactively what that decision looked like now, so we can kind of catch up all at once and compress the timeline and confirm we still believe in the sanctity of that decision and looking back at what that stuff would cost now so we can make those same decisions in a hurry. Here's current costs for that. Correct. I feel comfortable in bringing that back.
Okay. How did we get here? This one's difficult for all of us, I know. The first thing I would say is Oregon's property tax system doesn't grow at the same rate as inflation. This is really the basic foundational reason. And it's also not scaled to community desired service levels. It was set and unfortunately, local control doesn't happen through our property tax statewide laws, and so you can't adjust those. That's just one reason all cities are dealing with this right now. Moving on, there were really difficult budget decisions that have been made by people in my seat before me and people in all of our seats. And I believe that they made the best decisions that they could at the time, but I know they were difficult. They've been difficult every step of the way, and so I just want to acknowledge that. The other factor that we have and how we got here, and this is really to answer the questions, why aren't we maintaining what we have now? I should have started. That's a big question that we get a lot. Why would we give you more? Why would we upgrade? You can't maintain what you have now. So that's what this is designed to address. One of the factors in that was the 2008-9 market crash, when I was doing my research, the place I found it in the city documents, in the city sort of what I would consider our legislative history, was in the 2012 city budget. That, to me, is where, in the words in the budget, I was reading a shift in philosophy. And I put the quote directly from the budget in your staff report. But this is the model. We've heard David Renshaw say the run to fail model. That's where this language was really starting to take form. So what I saw in the 2012 budget was a reduction in Parks and Rec building maintenance line items, and a statement that said, we are going to not be doing maintenance, but instead we're going to rely on contingency, or what I think of as emergency money. Katie may think of it as something else, but emergency money if something fails. So that, to me, and when I went back and did the history, that's where the point in time really changed. It was a difficult decision, but that's where the reductions started to happen. And then if you look at parks maintenance, which is where I get a lot of comments about how did we get here and how can it look so bad, that's really where the significant reductions in park maintenance occurred. And David Renshaw was here for that. He can give you more information. I put a lot of information about it in the staff report, but we made significant and what I think were pretty openly public decisions about how we were going to take care of reducing the budget and what that would look like in the parks. And we spelled it out very clearly in the budget. It looked at things like less frequent graffiti removal, less frequent litter removal, we closed some of the bathrooms because it takes more money operationally to keep a bathroom open and clean it every day than if we just locked it. We turned some of the irrigation off, and we knew that the grass in some of our parks was going to brown out. We also stopped some of what would be maybe a little bit more beautification of planting beds or mulching. We laid that out in the 2013 budget. So that's our history that I could find of how did we get here. Things haven't gotten much better. We're still working on things, but that is really the foundation for how we got here. And again, here's the quote from the budget. Due to the city's current budget challenge, less preventative maintenance is planned, and major unanticipated repairs will be covered through general fund operational contingencies. So that was the two buildings. That was the community center and the aquatic center. Oh,
Scott, did you have another
multiple
question?
questions.
Actually, Councilor Chenoweth has his hand up.
Okay, Chris, please go ahead.
Question as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out where you say Oregon's property tax system doesn't grow at the same rate as inflation. That's accurate, but maybe not in the way most people think. The average rate of inflation since the two tax measures were put in place, so that was in 1995-ish, to the 2024 is 2.52%. The property tax system goes by 3%. So that means the property tax system is actually increasing at a greater rate than the overall inflation has since the implementation of these tax measures. And I think that's something that most people don't understand. The issues with budgeting are real, and they stem more from PERS and from other issues that have caused the budgeting to increase at a greater rate than that 3%. But inflation is really not the disparity between it and inflation is not really the underlying issue. And I just wanted to clarify that.
You was first.
Okay. Okay, Cunningham, you're first, and then you.
I was just calling out Councilor Chenoweth to bring attention.
Okay, yes, thank you. Director Muir, I'm not going to focus so much on the numbers, but more on the emotional side of things. Earlier you stated that the city would be able to repair things if they failed. And what constitutes a failure in the pool roof? Because when I took my kids there and we were in swim lessons and there's buckets everywhere, I consider that a failure. How do we define failure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a gray area and probably different levels of deciding what is failure. I can tell you we do look at it very strictly as a safety issue, and we've done reports and had consultants advise us about the safety of the roof, making sure that it's got some life left in it. You could call the the buckets on the floor a failure as well.
I do.
We have not pulled the trigger on asking for contingency for that. But it's a valid point.
It's an emotional failure for our community. I'll just say that when there's buckets all over, and it doesn't put McMinnville's face forward when we have swim meets, and it's just a poor representation of our capability.
Yeah, and I would just include staff in that feeling, in that emotional feeling. We don't like it either. So we're part of that community, and we don't like emptying those buckets. We don't like having to put them out, but it's all a matter of balance and finding the funds and the priorities. Thank you.
That's all.
Okay. Here's what I mentioned in the parks: reduce litter removal, all of those things, park restrooms closed, irrigation shut down, and then some of what I called the more beautification things, mulching, fall plantings. Those were very clearly laid out as we were making difficult budget decisions back then as things that we would no longer be doing. So that was my attempt to answer how we got here, because I know that's a big question for the public and the council. It started more than a decade ago of us trying to address budget cuts.
And since the last slide was on sort of parks maintenance, a question around bringing that back up. I think recently in the budget, going back a year or two, you've laid out a 3-year plan to bring back parks maintenance. Can you give us an update on where that is at, and where the budget committee and by proxy council has left that?
Mm-hmm. David and I were just talking about that the other day. We would call it a 3-phase approach to bring back and restore parks maintenance to the levels that we believe would deal with some of these issues. And the first phase was funded 2 years ago. And every year since then, we've put ad packages in the budget for the consideration of the budget committee and city council, but those have not yet been funded. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so we made a 1 of 3-year phase bring back investment. We've left that hanging, and in front of us are the ability to enact years 2 and 3 in that build back the parks maintenance.
Correct.
Excellent. And then switching gears to sort of this is context for how we made financial decisions to weather a long-term storm that was deferred maintenance, and that's kind of put us further down in this, never corrected that and put the money back into maintaining the facilities such that we have this. Part of going forward is, well, how do I trust that you're not going to do that again? Can you confirm that the number we heard, and remind us what that cost was, the cost delta of the operating for the joint rec center as opposed to the current operating of the community center and aquatic center. That model that you proposed to us does include an actual path to setting aside finances to maintaining the building to avoid this entire list.
Correct. So I think what you're referring to was the November work session that put forward a potential operating budget for the new rec center, the joint facility. Through that, there was a lot of opportunity for additional revenue, and there was also additional costs. And one of the things that we feel very strongly about is making sure that we don't get into this position again. And so we built into that budget, that operating budget, 1 FTE for maintenance of that building. And then we also put aside $150,000 a year through that budget to deal with capital replacement and maintenance. So in other words, when the bottom line came up on that operating budget, it was an additional $600,000 pull on the general fund, is how we call it, how we talked about it. And within that $600,000, a portion of that would go to make sure we don't get into this situation again. Same thing can be said for the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. It was really important, and I think this is near and dear to park maintenance's heart. It was really important for us to know, as we expand or enhance our facilities, we also need to think about those operating costs. And so that plan, too, talks about how much per acre we would need to add to the park maintenance maintenance budget should we acquire or develop parkland. So it's a path, it's a proposal, it's sort of best management practices for us to let you know and the public know, here's what the operating delta is, here are the opportunities, and think about both those things, capital and construction costs, in addition to how are you going to run it for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
So you've given us the tools to be able to, as the controllers of the purse, so to speak, enact these things.
Correct.
Yep.
You got a path. Whether that path exactly fits what you'd like to see, that's kind of what I think where we're at.
Understood.
Okay. Any other questions about how we got here? I do think, Councilor Tukolsky, thank you for calling it an emotional issue. I think you've hit it. It really is for everybody. We take pride in our facilities. We take pride in our parks. And it's been challenging inside the organization as well, particularly as we're trying to make things better. So thank you. Okay, another question that came up was how do we make fee structures fair when residents of McMinnville are already paying property taxes that non-residents don't? So keeping in mind that the property taxes, part of that would be a capital payment for construction, but part of that would be for the general fund, which does help Parks and Recreation operate. We took that into account when we did the November of 24 operating plan, and the discount that we put in there for city residents was 25%. That is one of the dials that you all control. So, for example, when we adopt a fee sheet, if we get into a new building and we bring forward the fees for you, and you think 25% is too much or not enough for residents to pay, you get to decide that. And we'll go back and fix the budget and say, okay, here's where you need to increase something if you wanted to decrease here, and vice versa.
Director Muir, I had a question about that. There's in the packet on page 10, there's a market comparison. Right now, we have no membership rate. The escalated rate was proposed to be $1,200 per family, I believe? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that's not the discounted rate, is it?
I think that was the in-town discount.
Okay, so so it's not 900, it's the 1,200 is the discounted.
I think so. I can check that for you, but I believe it was. I don't think we did any of the comparisons with out of city. 25% is pretty standard across other Parks and Rec areas, so I don't think we did that number, but I would want to confirm that for sure.
So if it's $1,200, it's basically $100 a month, and is that per family, or regardless if you have 10 children or one?
I would need to go back to that pro forma that we did and see what some of the parameters were. That work session had a lot of financial information on it, and I can pull that for you.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, it sounds like particularly related to fees is your area of interest.
Yeah, because if we're already paying taxes as citizens of McMinnville, and then we have to also pay to access the facility, I'm not sure that's going to fly.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges that we have in communicating, and it's like right now you do have to pay to take a swim lesson, and you do have to pay to get into the aquatic center.
Right.
The one-time cost, and that is subsidized already. The general fund already subsidizes those amounts, and so we're not changing the model by that pro forma that we brought forward in November. It's the same model as you're paying property taxes into the general fund. You're paying fees for additional services in those buildings, and you're paying, if the council decides to put a capital bond out there, you're paying that as part of your property taxes as well. So yeah, I understand it's kind of a conundrum. I will say there are certain things in the proposed rec center that would be free. There's a lot of community rooms in there, so if somebody was renting it for a meeting, obviously they wouldn't have to pay the admission rate to get in there. There are some other things where they would only be paying a fee for the program, and if they're paying the fee for the program, they don't need to pay the admission costs. And so it was kind of, it's a reasonable way to try and do cost recovery.
Right, it's reasonable to pay a fee for what you use. When we went to the Osborne Aquatic Center in Corvallis, we paid, I think it was $9 per person, which seemed low at the time, but I assume that was also subsidized through the taxpayers of the city of Corvallis, so.
Probably, and I don't think they're taking anybody at their pool right now because of the roof situation. So who knows what that'll look like. But for those of you that don't know, they had to close their facility a few months ago entirely because of a roof issue. So
Yeah, I haven't been there in quite some time.
yeah, this is why we're doing this work, is to hopefully stay out of that type of a situation.
Thank you.
And I can follow up with you on some of the more specific questions about the fees and the pro forma from November.
Council President? Oh, man, it was a good one. And I'm going to remember it. It's coming to me. I got this. Stalling's not help. Oh, man. We were talking about operating costs. Okay, so operating costs. So I don't disagree, but I felt some maybe blowback is too hard. Consternation, unease with those potential operating cost fees. And to me, it's we have a bulk, a round number, good tool assessment of year over year, this is what we expect this facility to cost to operate. Here's industry standards based on your area and size of community for usage and types of usage. You know, one number divided by the other. Here's the potential operating costs that you're going to need to do, and then you gotta turn it into something that's manageable to us to understand. Ergo, here's a family of 4 per month fees. I think whether it's for the next meeting or more information, but I think just sort of knowing that additional dialogue can and should be had around how do we look at gradations of it, because it does take all of that money to continuously operate it at the level we want to operate it at, right? Making sure that we have a savings account for when we need to replace the roof, making sure we're staying on top of those standard things. But if we don't want people who helped fund the construction of it by voting yes on the bond to have to pay that high a fee, if we feel like that's too high of a fee, let's look at models on how to lower that cost but still fill the bucket as it needs to be filled. So ways we can, here's a way to get everybody under the age of 13 in for free, and that bumps that $600,000 number up. Here's a way to get all this group in free. Interesting ways. So I think it may end up being a good later discussion if we are talking about looking at going back to sort of different structures or sizes of facility. Then we need to rerun that operating cost number. But I think putting a pin in wanting to have a more broad discussion on how do we cover the costs and what are those costs if we want to change the fee structure to be lower for in-town residents, or we go talk to the county and see if we can get ongoing operating cost help for out-of-town residents, and in terms of ways year over year we can continue to put chlorine in the pool and on all that. So I think having a broader discussion on the differences in the operating costs going forward will be helpful.
Okay, and I'm hearing also scaling it with whatever the scaling of the capital component is as well, which we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think related to the county, one of the way we've looked at that is there a buy down rate for Lafayette, for example, where they could buy and subsidize so that their residents can get the in-city discount. I think those are all conversations that we can have. The city manager and I have had at least one conversation related to that, so that I would anticipate that would be a part of the whole conversation as well. Okay. Another question was asked, did we look at all of the revenue options? And in phase 1, we did look at all of the ones that were listed here. I think what I hear a lot about is, what about the, I put this in the staff report, what about the unique or more creative ways of recovering costs? And what I would say, yes, yes, and yes. However, because they're not certain and they're somewhat volatile, we did not use those to build the operating budget. So for example, naming rights down in Medford, they've done an amazing job of recouping fees by selling the rights to name facilities. It's great. It's worked great for them. We don't know what that market would look like here for us yet, so we did not include it in the pro forma. We don't want a best case scenario. We want to be realistic. However, should something like that happen and come in the door, you all would be able to adjust the dials accordingly. So if you could do that by buying down the full capital amount, you could do that by discounts in the facilities, you would get to decide how to use that. So we do think about them. If they're more risky than fees, partnerships, and some of the more traditional revenue sources, we wouldn't recommend building them into the pro forma unless they're more solid. Okay, another question that came up is, what does it actually cost to put this on a November ballot? And thankfully, the Yamhill County Clerk got back to us, and that cost is approximately $115,000 to $125,000. So that might look like more than what you saw the last time, which I think was in 2019 when the initiative petition was filed, and that was about $70,000. However, we've had an increase in voter turnout and voter registration in Yamhill County, and inflation, and so that number is now $115,000 to $125,000. So that's the money that we would pay to get it on the ballot.
And that's because currently there's no other election slated to happen. And so if anybody were to walk up and want something on, that would be the cost for a single issue in McMinnville of McMinnville only voters to publish that
Yep.
election.
Yes, we would split the cost if there are other things on the ballot.
Making want to wait till November?
What's that?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. I know that there was a comment that the cost estimates for park construction and maintenance in the pros plan seemed high to a couple of you. I wanted to let you know how we got to those. I also wanted to let you know we've checked those against actuals. Those numbers are in line with what we've seen. And if anything, like I said earlier, we would need to update those. And right now, any cost estimates previous to the last 16 months we'd want to look at, and I would anticipate they would go up. The maintenance estimates were checked against regional providers, so we did a survey. We gathered all the data about cost per acre. We analyzed that, and then we handed it over to the consultant who does construct parks and does the estimates for operating costs. And that's how the numbers got in the pros plan. So we feel good about those numbers. I don't know if there was something specifically in there that compared to an actual cost that anybody wanted us to dig into, but I did want to let you know how those came about. They seem to be pretty accurate from the last park that we constructed.
So when I read this, and this question sort of comes from the last 15 years of my professional experiencing, having to push numbers across the table to construct things is always more than what people expect to pay. What you're telling me here is that despite it sounding like a lot of money, these are grounded numbers based accurately by professionals doing this work, and these are reasonable numbers to expect to pay for that work, despite it being more than we would love to pay.
More than we all would love to pay. I would say we compared them with actuals. Yeah, for sure.
Understood. Thank you.
Council President, I have a question. Director Muir, I had one final question. So we have the facility, like Wings and Waves, is a private facility. They stand on their own 2 feet financially, or for better or for worse. I haven't heard a number that states what would it cost if someone were to just use this as, I don't want to say a private model because it's not, it's a city model. But what would it cost per user if we were to keep the cost as low as possible, but also have the people that are using the facility actually pay for that facility? So
Yep.
the reason I'm asking this is because we have taxpayers that will be paying for this that will never step foot inside these buildings. And so there will be pushback in some areas saying, why would I pay for this if I will never use it? I'm not saying that that's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. All I'm saying is it'd be interesting to have that number.
And could you rephrase what you're looking for out of that number? I'm not sure I totally tracked it.
What would be like your entry fee, or what would be the fee for a group to use this facility?
Okay.
If it were more based on like a private model? And again, I
So-
understand it's not, and it won't be, but
Yeah.
just a question.
Sure. And so maybe that comparison chart of the nearby like structures that are operated by either districts or
Yeah.
nonprofits, look at private entities that may offer something similar. We can look at that. I think there's a couple facilities up in Portland that would be considered more private. We can check in with Wings and Waves and those kinds of things.
I'd just be curious.
Sure.
Can I jump in on that one? Wings and Waves has had a tremendous amount of of work done by the Stoller Group to actually keep it viable. I believe it's actually not viable standing on its own 2 feet. So we may want to look at like another center that is similar to that. I don't know if the Shark Center in Sun River could be comparable to it.
I think, and that one might be public as well, but yes, I will do the research and look around and see what I can find for sure.
About the Multnomah Club.
Yeah, those are the ones that I was thinking of.
And if a tag on some information that would accompany that to come back is sort of a down and dirty on the public, private, how multiple partnerships or school district operated, city owned, that kind of thing, and a bulk assessment of the amenities, right? This is a rec pool only with water slides, hot tub, period. What does the facility look like?
Got it. Yep. Okay. Any questions about the financial? This was a big topic. This was the biggest one that we have. Any questions about the financial history and context? You've been asking them along, but I'm happy to kind of clean up anything that.
This is actually for context. In your slide, you referred to Measure 5 and Measure 50 being an issue, and I know Councilor Chenoweth weighed in a little bit on that, on just the percentages over, based off of CPI. And I think, one of the things that we need to consider, though, when we're talking about this is the real market value versus assessed value. And that's where that kind of comes into play. Just looking at a property, and by all honesty, I own this property as a rental property. In tax year 2020, the assessed value came in at $193,000. Again, these are just numbers that I've pulled. November of 2020, the Zillow, granted there's some flux there, $350,000 in 2020. But then the total assessed Zillow, granted not exact, $517,000 in today's dollars. So that is a 47% growth from the Zillow rate. That is not considering the $193,000 of actual assessed rate. So that's where that Measure 5 really comes in with a lot of weight to it in changing what our tax basis is, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that is also one of the challenges of helping people understand what this could mean to their property, is getting them focused on assessed value and looking that up as opposed to market value. And if you use market value, it's a lot higher, obviously, than assessed value. So as I've been out talking about what this could look like for property taxes, I go, and I think Councilor Garvin used to do this, I go to the county's page and look up somebody's address and figure out which number they should be using. Yeah. And I just noticed Councilor Chenoweth has his hand up.
Is Councilor Cunningham done?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. So two things. First, I know we've already gotten these numbers, but when you provide this new packet of information, will you either provide for all of us the direct links to the cost estimates for maintenance, or not maintenance, for what it's going to cost? Yeah, maintenance, for what it's going to cost to maintain these buildings going forward. My memory in the discussion point when we had that brought to us is we were at the end of the day, even with increases in income coming in, we were still looking at a pretty solid difference between on what we were going to have to subsidize as out of our general fund to maintain this. So if you could, for context, provide that or links to it within your responses, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Yep.
The second thing I wanted to say, just in response to Councilor Cunningham, is you're absolutely right. There is a huge difference between market value and assessed value. But the idea of those tax measures was to provide something that wasn't all over the place, because as we well know, in 2008, property values crashed. We wouldn't want to have a city government where they were taxing based on real market values with the potential for large upswings and large decreases. So the idea was to put in a fixed increase that the city government should be able to maintain, that which was greater than the current cost of inflation. And that should have been sufficient to do the job. Unfortunately, what we have found in city governance is the cost of expenses is out increasing that cost of inflation. And a lot of that has to do with PERS. So just more context to that, but you're absolutely right. There is a huge difference between market value and assessed value.
One other thing, if I can, I think there was a question from the dais last time about the fact that we had estimated that there would not be a huge change to the operating costs for the library and the senior center, and that was called into question. And I think, to be precise, we don't know that information yet. I think for the senior center, the way we look at it is hopefully we would be eliminating some of our waiting lists so the opportunity for revenue would increase. And since it's not a dramatic floor plan expansion or additional spaces that we would need to keep eyes on, we hope that that would be neutral. And the library, we just don't have enough information about it. It depends on how many floors it is. It depends on a lot more details in that. But I did want to acknowledge that that's correct. We assumed that, but that would need to be tightened up later on. Okay, partnerships. I have to say, and several of them are in the room here, we love our partners, and we have a lot of them, and we are grateful for them. So we already have a culture of partnering. We did list out, and I think do pros and cons of potential project partners in phase 1 in the feasibility study. And for a while, I was keeping a spreadsheet of when I went to talk to the partners and how I addressed potential partnering. I hope that everybody received the message that we're ready to partner on this facility as a city. That's been the staff message. In addition, what the phase 1 feasibility report suggested was we needed to firm up some of our partnerships. In other words, they were loose agreements, our handshake agreements. And so, for example, since that happened, we have entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Friends of the Senior Center, just to firm up. It's real simple, but just to firm out what they expect from us and what we expect from them in a relationship. And they were great to work with on that. So we're just continuing to take these partnerships to the next level in terms of best management practices. I will say that there's a timing challenge. So people will say, but when? When are you doing this? If we're going to partner, when is it happening? And so part of it is a chicken and egg thing. We need to have an idea of what they might be getting into and partnering with us on. So I think just continuing to move all these conversations forward is critical and keep the partners at the table. And I feel like they are. So. There was a question about Linfield. Have they been considered a partner? Yes, we actually have a long history of partnering with Linfield. We did federal work study employees with them for a long time. We have a lot of employees, or in the past have had a fair number of employees from Linfield. And then we also have a lot of volunteers from Linfield help support our programs. So before this started, we have a great, and we've also shared the pool when we needed to, when something needed to be done in one pool or the other. We did enter into a memorandum of understanding with them about locating the rec center at, I think, what we called the Keck property at the last meeting. That was an opportunity for us to say, okay, they're not going to negotiate with anybody or offer this property to anybody while we're in this conversation with them. 6 months later, when the memorandum of understanding would have renewed, they let the city know they were not interested in renewing that memorandum of understanding, and they were going to move forward on strategic planning and master planning for their properties. We did have a kind of an ex officio member of MacPac through Linfield, and that was great to have them at the table for that. So we have partnered with them. We look forward to continuing those partnerships. I don't know if that satisfied have we talked to Linfield, but that's kind of the background and the history on that partnership. So happy to answer any other questions about the partnerships. I will say they are critical to our success. Okay. Now let's talk about location. This had a lot of conversation. One of the questions that came up was, what about expanding at the current pool? This came up at your very first Phase 1 meeting. There was an architect in the audience and asked that question. The architect that was on the team to do the report answered pretty informally that that he was aware the site was already too small for what the current use is. Parking is problematic, particularly during our arthritis or older adult programming at the pool. I get the most complaints about the fact that there just aren't enough spots close enough for our seniors or older adults. And then the developable area of that Upper City Park is 2.8 acres, and that includes the area where the Dragon Park is. So it would really include that whole Upper City Park thing. So that's about as far as that went. We can certainly look at anything different there, but that's the background and the history of that. And then about 35 trees at that Upper City Park, which I know we all love. So MacPac did adopt siting criteria as part of their discussion about how they were going to look at locations. Each one of these bullets had sub-bullets under them that dealt with more specifics on it. So, development capacity, is there acreage that we could expand in the future if 30 years down the road we wanted to add something? There were a lot of proximity questions looked at. Are there like services nearby? Does it make sense to locate us near something that's already serving our community and something? Stewardship of funding was important to them. Supports inclusion and equity, and some of that is the access and bike paths, sidewalks, and that sort of thing. And then regulatory issues were also one of the things we wanted to evaluate. And so we did a series of site analysis, and the Community Development Department and Heather Richards helped us with this. We started with a need for a 10-acre parcel. There were 13 sites identified and analyzed, and this is just a quick screen grab of what that analysis looked like for each of the sites. And this one also happens to be one of the ones that I get a lot of questions on. Have you looked at the school district site over on Hill Road? And yes, indeed we did. And if you all were a part of the joint meetings that we've had in the past with the school district, it's clear they want to keep their property for school uses. So this is one of the sites that I get a lot of questions about from the community, is a lot of people want it over there. So we have looked at that as part of MacPac. We went through, I think it was 13 sites that were identified that were 10 acres and evaluated all of those. As I mentioned, we did have 2 sites kind of moved to the front of the pack. The first one was with Linfield. We did the MOU with them, and then in December, we entered into a memorandum of understanding on the Miller property, and then City Council authorized for us to enter into the purchase and sale agreement. We have approximately 2 years to fund the construction under that purchase and sale agreement. There is one potential 60-day extension, but we've got 2 years under that purchase and sale agreement. So that was quick for location. The other thing that I asked MacPac as we were looking through the sites is if anybody has a site that they want to bring forward, and this is one of the ways that the Miller property came forward, we're happy to look at it. Just point us towards it and we'll do the evaluation. So any other questions about
I
location?
have one question. Director Muir, I know originally there was a desire to have water access in this area, but it sounds like that's not feasible. Is that correct or incorrect?
Do you mean the recreational boat launch area?
Yeah, specifically from the Miller property.
Oh, I think somewhere along the Joe Dancer kind of Kiwanis Miller property area, there is the potential for non-motorized boat or water access there.
I agree with you. My question, let me clarify my question. Is there access to the water from the Miller property, or would there be?
There is informal access right now that I don't think we would want to formalize. How's that? You can get to the water.
But we wouldn't have the opportunity to launch a kayak from the new rec centers, should it be?
Oh, no, not that close. I'm sorry, I understand your question now. No, it would not be necessarily like a shared parking. You could certainly walk what you need from wherever you're coming from down to the river, but I understand your question, and sorry.
Those would be 2 separate facilities then?
Well, I think we kind of look at it like a campus. So if you have the Miller property and then you have Joe Dancer and Kiwanis, that would sort of all be one area that the community could come to, but.
I appreciate your terminology, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to phasing. So I didn't ask for clarity at your last meeting, but I think we have the opportunity now. There are a number of different ways we could phase or scale a project like this. And you all probably have ideas about this as well. The first is we could do smaller facilities with fewer amenities. That would scale things down. We could also build in phases, and that would phase things so that we wouldn't necessarily have to do construction on all of the facilities at the same time, which, by the way, we wouldn't do that anyway. We can also fund in phases, and you'll get a little bit more information about this on April 8th. But you could break the bond down and say, okay, we're going to do one bond in, this year, and then we're going to do another bond in 10 or 20 years, and you could phase it out that way. And then, like I said, on April 8th, we'll be talking about borrowing in phases. So we would not be issuing all of the, regardless of what the dollar amount is that the voters might be approving, we would not issue all of that debt initially. We would want to do construction drawing first, and then we would want to go back. So that part will be in phases as well. So there's a number of different ways you can look at that. I will say MacPac really looked at it from the perspective of smaller facilities. So we do have some information about that, but there's certainly many options about how you can look at that. So for that recommendation, the MacPac, at the time, the city was really involved in below base, mid, and optimal core service evaluations. And so we took that forward to MacPac and said, we should probably make some recommendations that scaled along with this, just like the city's looking at on their services. And so they did look at that. The optimal recommendation is the one that you're most familiar with, which we call the MacPac recommendation. And then they also provided some parameters for mid and base, and we already are at below base for our existing facilities. This is what it looked like. I know you can't read this in the MacPac report, and I've broken that down. So for the base level, option 1, the MacPac made the recommendation to keep, and this is similar to the scenario that you all have asked for a cost estimate on, but you can see what they were looking at on option 1, and then made a scaled down option 2 as well with one new facility. They also made a mid-level recommendation, which was just a little bit less than the MacPac sort of the dream big scenario. So we didn't have a square footage for any of these. It was just sort of like, let's list the amenities and let's list the priorities, and also talk about where we can potentially add on later. So we might be able to add another gym onto a building later. And so they looked at those kinds of things. That was the mid-level. And then, like I said, the one that we're all the most familiar with was considered the optimal level recommendation for the MacPac. So I think that what I would say is you're going to get more information about the financial phasing on April 8th. You've got a little information about the different scaling, and then you've given me direction about another scale and cost estimate that you would like. So that's what I've got from this. Any other questions about phasing or scaling? Okay.
So when you bring back modernized, updated, current point in time, you bring all those numbers up to a current point in time analysis. Will you include a scaled approach to the rec community center as a part of that, or can you? In following those MacPac recommendations?
Yeah, we can do, and I think the one most closely resembling the suggestion that Councilor Chenoweth made is option 1 at the base level. So yes, we can bring those back. Does that answer your question? Maybe not.
Yes, you can bring those scaling options back with costs and have those also reflect a current point in time analysis of costs.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other, go back.
Can we add on to option 1 the seismic retrofitting? Because I don't think that's called out necessarily in that one.
Yes. Yep. Any other questions about phasing or scaling? Okay, so next steps. How are we doing on time? Close. like I've talked about a number of times, you will have the April 8th work session to talk about the phasing related to financial and potential bond issuance. And then this is the part where I want to make sure I'm clear on what the majority of counselors would like us to bring back. I want to give you a little bit more information as we're talking about the construction cost estimates and operating cost estimates. I think the way to be most efficient with the city's dollars is for us to bring back the design and capital construction costs first, see how you're feeling about those, and rather than run operating costs on all of those, narrow that group down with you so that we can run the operating costs on a whatever feels right to you all at that time. It would just be less expensive if I didn't run the potential operating budgets on all of the scenarios. So you don't do motions in work sessions, but hopefully you all will give me a heads up about where we're headed.
When you say not adding in the operating, but I think one that would be unavoidable would be the difference in running electricity and heating and water in those size buildings. You can staff them with less people. You can shut off areas. You can close down spaces to minimize your costs, but you have to heat it. Regardless. So I think at least that in the operating level would be important to know the difference of the three different options.
Oh, I see. I will see what we can do. Yeah, let me do.
I would imagine that two separate buildings would operationally, no matter what, be different than one building when you're talking about HVAC specifically.
Right. I hear what you're saying. Let me work with this and see how I can get you all what you need, whether it's in phasing information or all at once. So I think all I'm looking for is head nods that you all are on the same page about bringing back at least one alternative construction cost estimate for looking at the existing buildings and building in the seismic and the ADA and sort of fixing the existing problems on that, and then also scaling some of the improvements in the building in a line item way that we would recommend.
This is a head nod.
Thank you. I mean, we will, I will say, one of the things you can expect the staff to make a recommendation on, if the community center is going to stay at the location that it is, I have real concerns about the safety of that building. And making safety improvements to that building in terms of access and monitoring exits and entrances is a really critical part. I would not feel good about not telling you how important that is if that building stays where it is. In addition, there's a detox facility under conversation across the street to the east by the county. So the conflicting uses in that general area are real. We see them every day inside our doors. We know they impact not only staff, but our patrons as well. And you can count on me to bring back some recommendations to improve the safety of that if the location stays the same.
Thank you. Councilor Payne?
I just you were kind of heading in that direction, but there's safety concerns structurally and safety concerns geographically. I just want to make sure those are two distinctive issues, but you're talking about both.
We will fix the structural issues. That will be a part of it. And then I think the reason why I'm pointing this out, and Councilor Chenoweth has his hand up, is I didn't hear it specifically called out. I heard required improvements, ADA, and seismic. And what I'm telling you is staff will want to make a recommendation for the cost to make safety improvements as well. That's just not something I would feel good about not addressing with any amount of
Councilor
money.
Geary and then Councilor Chenoweth.
Yeah, I think well put. No matter how many investments we make in terms of everything we've talked about, if they go through with the county goes through with that center, which I think will do good, puts the community center, the source of our Christmas programs currently, our child programming, basketball rec, a central spoke of much of that culture, parks and recreation offering that City McMinnville does in the center of the triangle of the jail, the detox center, and mental health. It's a pretty brutal location to be offering that type of service. And so I think part of that calculus, dollars aside, is that conversation, which I'll save for when you bring that information back to us, because I think that's a really realistic piece of that equation. So maybe I would add, in terms of a constant question I get that would be good to have a sort of staff's position to us that we could ask and answer, is what do we do with the assets if we build the new facility? And we've flirted with it and we just kind of talked about it. It's a big community asset, and it would be a big decision to undergo as a part of it. But this process would free us up to have that conversation. So I think giving us an official sort of discussion point or jumping off point on how to handle that conversation of what are we going to do with those facilities when they're no longer in use because we've built the new facility that's taken its place would be very helpful.
Thank you, Councilor Chenoweth.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, I was just going to follow up with what Susan was talking about regarding safety concerns. Can you just have that as a line item in the base level? Because I think, to me, those safety concerns being met are part of what's going to make that building actually complete and ready for use again.
Okay.
So,
go.
and if there's a different counselor has a different opinion on that, that's fine. But I just think I'd like it as a line item so I can see what that cost actually looks like. But I think it should be part of that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, in addition to ADA and seismic and required improvements, code compliance improvements, making sure that we also have the somewhat design elements. One example I can tell you is the control point at the community center. We have got to redesign that front door. The lot from the counter, you cannot see the front door. You cannot see people that go on the other side of the staircase. So what I'm hearing you say, Councilor Chenoweth, is make sure we include things like that in the
and complete external access control and that kind of stuff.
Yes. Okay.
The basic security that we would expect to have in such an environment. I mean, to me, I get we made do with what the building was, but given the prison was next door at the time, I would have thought that some of this would have been dealt with originally when we first started using it as a community center. But yes, I want that as a separate line item.
Thank you, Councilor. We have about 2 minutes left. Councilor Cunningham, you had one final comment?
I want us to be a little careful when we refer to its location, the current community center location was sandwiched in, although not ideal. I would just point out that folks that are going to the detox center and as well as mental health are actively trying to take care of themselves. And so that shouldn't be necessarily seen as brutal to the community. I would think that that's something that we really want to promote.
Thank you for that comment. Are there any more comments before we adjourn the meeting?
I had one.
Councilor?
Thank you. So I understand what you're saying, that people are trying to help themselves. That's a good thing. We do have jail inmates being turned loose with all of their belongings directly outside the community center, and that's not safe.
300 feet.
That's it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And if any counselor has any other comments to share, please direct those directly to staff via email. I will now adjourn the work session at 6:59.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you.
So Eugene. Why would you say that?
Oh, no. I was like, I've been wrong 3 times already. don't know if we've like officially met, but I feel like.
If counselors could make their way back to the dais. Yeah, just stand up where you're at in the back there is fine, or in the front row where you're at. Yeah, see. Yeah. We need more counselors at the dais. I will now call the, excuse me, I'd like to call the city council meeting to order and request Claudia to do a roll call.
Counselor Cunningham?
Here.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Present.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Present on Zoom.
Counselor Payne? Here. Counselor Geary?
Good evening.
Mayor Morris is not present tonight, and Council President Peralta.
Here. If you're able, please stand for the pledge. I'd like to invite Pool Manager Rob Porter to lead us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that we have a rather large crowd in attendance tonight. I am very thankful for members of the community for coming out. This is the section of the meeting where we invite public comment from the audience. We're limited to 32 minutes of total public comment. So each comment is limited to just 4 minutes. Because there's so many people in the queue who would like to comment, if you can provide your comment in less than 4 minutes, it would be appreciated, but we will be keeping time and we'll be keeping strict time at 4 minutes. Any interested members of the community are invited to provide comment. Any comment provided that requires some type of follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak to any topic other than a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing at some future date. If you're on Zoom and wish to speak, please raise your hand feature or the chat feature or send a chat to the city recorder team. Once your turn is up, we will announce your name and unmute your mic. When you come up, please announce your name and the city you live in for the record, and we will start with those who have pre-registered. Claudia, can you please call the first person who has signed up for public comment?
Yes, and before we start, I do want to state for the record that we received some written public comment that I have emailed to council. Those will be entered into the record in the amended packet posted tomorrow, and those were from Friends of Quarry Park, Tara and Corey Rich, and then Steve Caldwell. First, we have Kevin Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Peralta. Thank you, Council. I just wanted to first off thank Councilor Cunningham, Mayor Morris, and Councilor Chenoweth for meeting with our organization. Oh, I didn't answer. I'm Kevin Chambers. I live in McMinnville. I'm also representing the Culture, Recreation, and Parks Political Action Committee. We have been trying to meet with all of the counselors to get some feedback. We had some really, really good conversations with those counselors that we have met with. It gave me hope for our community. I don't agree politically with some of the people that we've met with, but we were able to have really good, strong conversations about what we need to do with with this parks bond. Our goal as a political action committee is to come up with a solution where we can all be on the same page, and all of our counselors, all of our staff can be supportive of this park bond and be behind it so that we can get it passed. So we would really appreciate being able to meet with those counselors we haven't met with yet, and we can reach out again to figure out that timing. And then the other thing I wanted to talk briefly about was just to push on the urgency of this project. Again, we have that 2-year memorandum with the Miller property. I also think politically this is a good time for us to be putting up this bond. We have the school bond coming up. We have some other conflicting bond measures that we could run into if we push this too far. I know we do all want to have all the right information, but I also wanted to try to push a little bit of urgency in terms of getting this done sooner rather than later. And I just want to again state that our committee is very flexible on what this looks like in terms of phasing, in terms of facilities. We would just really like to get to a point where we can all be on the same page and have a project that our town deserves and that we can be proud of. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Camden Parsons.
Camden, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My name is Camden Parsons. I reside in McMinnville, Oregon, and I'm representing McMinnville Swimming, both from the high school and the club setting. First, excuse my unprofessionalism. I didn't manage to get a printed copy of what I had written down, but hopefully cut me a little bit of slack. So good evening. Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to come in here and speak today. I've been a member of the McMinnville Swim Club for about 8 years now, and I'm a senior at McMinnville High School. This past weekend, myself and some of my teammates competed at the OSAA 6A High School State Championship meet, and we were able to take home this beautiful third place trophy. We tied with Westview. Thank you. We tied with Westview and accumulated 77 points as a team. This was a great display of all of our hard work, all of the time and commitment we put in, kind of just sewn into this like quilt of just triumph. But I wouldn't be here today without the recreational and aquatic facility and all of the support that we have garnered over the years. Many of us actually found our passion as swimmers in the very same aquatic center that stands, only a block away. We started, we learned how to kick, then we learned how to swim. We climbed the ranks of, the club, and then, we got into high school. And then now most of us are state qualifiers, and a couple of us are national level competitors. All of this, took place in this aquatic center, and in recent years, people of our community and other communities have been showing up. They've been taking note of what we've been able to accomplish, and just about 2 weekends ago, at our 6A-3 conference championship meet, the bleachers were basically flooded. I mean, not a single yard or stretch or whatever of bleacher was left unoccupied. So to the council, as you, let me see what I have here. I worded it funny. As you continue the discussion for this new MacPac, the center with the aquatic center, gym facilities, please consider the tradition of McMinnville swimming. Our town, along with our clubs and teams for swimming, can use the lanes of this new pool to continue our training and fitness for all age groups and all skill levels, whether you're just learning to swim or, are some sort of medal Olympian. Additionally, we're hoping that this facility ensures plenty of seating and room available for big events that we enjoy hosting, such as large club meets or conference championships, or other sorts of things such as recreational classes. With what we have accomplished as both individual swimmers and as collectives, we can only imagine the possibilities and accomplishments that are available to us with a bigger, better pool. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Next, we have Olivia Johnson.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Olivia Johnson, and I live here in McMinnville. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm here specifically to support the plan to build on the Miller property. I have 4 kids here, and I was actually raised here, so I've been here for about 40 years, minus the time that I was gone. And as someone who has been here for about 40 years, I'm disappointed to see how poorly the past generations have planned for the future. There are so many local people from my generation who have stayed here or come back who are running businesses, serving in public office, teaching, and serving in many other ways in the community. And I feel like we all came back because we love McMinnville so much, but we have been let down through the infrastructure for the pool, and the library is inadequate for families. It does not have enough size, or is not big enough. And inadequate parking at all the facilities. I was there watching those boys win districts. They did such an incredible job, and he is not joking when he says those bleachers were overflowing and people were parking into the downtown spaces because there just is not enough space to support such a thriving swim program that McMinnville has. I think it's a shame to see McMinnville residents, so many of them, I have kids aged 3 to 11, so I'm in the preschool all the way up to the middle school age group, and so many McMinnville residents are using the Newburgh aquatic facilities because McMinnvilles are inadequate, and they don't have the structure to support multiple programs at once. They give priority to lap swimming or senior water programs instead of children or other things like that. It's impossible to get into the swim lessons, impossible to get into gymnastics, things like that. So many of our facilities are too small. I would say that aside from a couple of neighborhood parks and Discovery Meadows, Joe Dancer is the exception to this rule. Joe Dancer is impressive. It has adequate parking, all 3 seasons of sports that are there. It has paths, and it has well-maintained lawns, trees for shade in the summer when you're sitting out there and it's 90 degrees during a softball game. So it has been very well planned, and this is why I think that the Miller property is such a perfect extension. I like that Director Muir called it a campus. It is right there close to downtown. It is close to Joe Dancer, which you see so many families at most of the year, and so I think it is a good extension. And it is also close to Alpine Avenue, which I don't know if you considered that, but Alpine, the city has worked really hard to develop Alpine, and there are places like, I think it's Flag and Wire Coffee, Mac Market, places that the community is really embracing and spends a lot of time in. And so I think it is a really good extension of that side of town. And I know you brought up the possibility for like a boat launch. And if you do think of that whole area as a campus, McMinnville is basically entirely surrounded by water, and there are very few places where we are taking advantage of that. And lots of people in the community use kayaks and things like that, and they have to go to another town to access a boat launch. So maybe it wouldn't be right in that same parking lot, but to think of that as a campus and to use that to bring that into our town, I think that some of the neighboring smaller towns would come and take advantage of that and really appreciate that. And I think that lastly, we can't underestimate that it is a very beautiful location with that river view, and it's in an area of town that has possibility for expansion in the future, expansion for pickleball courts, tennis courts, and adequate parking. So, okay, thank you.
Next, we have Amanda Pawanka.
Amanda, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sal. Hello, I'm Amanda Pawanka, and I live in McMinnville. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Quarry Park. I am so glad that I listened to council meetings because I didn't know what was going on until last council meeting, and people were talking about it. So what did I do is I called Dan at Visit McMinnville to ask him directly, what are your plans? What is happening? Tell me all the details. I think it's a win, 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 and more win, because all they want to do is create ADA access. They want some mountain biking trails and walking paths. They're not going to remove any trees. It just seems perfect because they're going to be using not our tax dollars, but the lodging tax that Visit McMinnville uses, and then they were going to write grant money to get more money to develop it. I feel like Quarry Park is a severely underutilized park, right in the middle of town. I've lived here 10 years, and I only heard about Quarry Park literally 3 years ago. And I have 3 kids, and one of my kids rides his bike, and if the BMX trails get put in there, which, again, talking to Dan, he said that's a maybe, we don't know, it could go somewhere else. That would be amazing, because there's such a lack of things to do for our kids in this in this town. So I am 1,000% for Visit McMinnville using their money, using the lodging tax money to develop this park, make it better, make it more usable, make it more ADA friendly, all the good things. And then the second thing is that Maple Grove that is off Fox Ridge. I am a part of the housing pack, and this last meeting that we had, we were talking about codes, and it wasn't until literally today that I was like, oh, we should write into the code, if you cut down a tree, you owe $1,000, $2,000. Like the big if, we can write into city code. If it's on a private property and it's a protected species, there are these things you have to adhere to in order to cut it down or leave it up or whatever. I think that's completely doable if we still have time to amend the code, which I think we do. You're the leader of the Housing PAC Committee, so you would know. Anyways, and that's all I have to say about that. So thank you so much.
Next, we have Marianne Brendan-Mole.
Thank you. I propose that Quarry Park remain a nature park. Quarry Park, oh, that's right, Marianne Brendamule, McMinnville, sorry. Quarry Park is a natural.
Marianne, excuse me. It's very difficult to hear you. Could you pull the mic a little closer? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Is that better? Better? Can you hear me now? Okay. Quarry Park is a naturally made nature park. It provides a sanctuary for all types of flora and fauna and is a peaceful sanctuary for all people who walk through it. It gives Anita a break from the sounds of the city, especially the loud traffic noise from 2nd Street. Quarry Park has been used and enjoyed by the citizens of McMinnville as a nature park for 50-plus years, watched over by the surrounding neighborhood. Nature parks inside cities are very rare and need to be protected for future generations. A nature park and a BMX park cannot coexist. If Quarry Park, as it is today, is destroyed, it will take another 50-plus years to create another one. I therefore oppose the city's plan to change the park into a BMX park. Thank you.
Next, we have Emily Leinertz.
Thank you. And it's Emily Leonards, a resident here in McMinnville. And I came to to voice my support for the MacPac full package, the optimal package. And my vantage point is really that money spent on prevention is money saved on intervention. So I took a little time to kind of support that and find some statistics that might help bolster that. And something I heard you all say today about being in a triangle of maybe challenging places for a community center. Statistics show that crime prevention is 40% less in communities that have youth programs and after-school activities for juveniles. Improved school performance, 20% higher test scores if there's after-school activities for juveniles. CDC drowning, number 2 for children under 14. So I don't know if any of you guys try to get into swim lessons. I have 2 children after the pandemic, and we had to go to Newburgh to teach my kids how to swim. So I think of the economic impact, the idea that well-maintained recreational facilities will bring businesses, will bring families, and keep the ones here. I moved here on purpose from the East Coast. I used to work at the YMCA, and so a model of a place where I can bring my children, my senior citizen mother, and we can all recreate and all commune together is a model that I know works. So I just came to voice my support, and I thank you for your due diligence and hope you move forward with this proposal. Thank you.
Next, we have Brian Branch.
Thank you, Council. Brian Branch, I'm a McMinnville resident, and I'll keep things brief here, but from my position, the current facilities the city has in terms of the community center and the aquatic center are not adequate to meet the needs of my family or the community. And listening to city staff talk as well, it seems like the city believes that the facilities aren't adequate or even frankly safe for children, which I have an 8-year-old and 11-year-old, so that's fairly concerning to hear, especially when their schools have performances at the community center on a regular basis. I'd also say I believe quite strongly that that physical activity and other community activities are crucial to mental and physical well-being of citizens in our community, and that investment in activities of those nature is a good investment for the future of our city. Thank you.
Next, we have Miranda Morton.
Hey y'all, Miranda Morton. I live in McMinnville with my partner and 4-year-old son, and you guys heard it already, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, but getting into gymnastics, swimming classes is harder than getting Taylor Swift tickets. It's impossible, and so all of us are headed to Tualatin, to Newburgh, down to Salem, in order to get our kids the activities that they need. We're a family that really invests in our town. We shop at the stores, we eat at the restaurants, we do everything that we can to try to help see this community grow and continue to thrive. And we're really not able to do that with the resources that we have for the aquatic center or the community center. I know there's a lot of families like me that spend every Saturday driving 45 minutes to the Chehalem Valley Aquatic Center. I see them there, right? All the kids in my son's class are there swimming with us instead of in McMinnville. I'd also note that the Chehalem Aquatic Center is not in downtown Newburgh, and there has not, from my perception, been an issue with getting people in the door there and the community activated around that space. So for all of those reasons, I guess I should have said it at the front, but I am here in support of the optimal plan and really look forward to a thriving community and aquatic center here in McMinnville.
Next, we have Todd Severson.
Hello, my name's Todd Severson, McMinnville, Oregon, and I'm here to speak in favor of progressing the Parks and Rec facility. I have a statement I'd like to read. So, dear distinguished council, my name is Todd, owner of Mac Market, chief operating officer of Chipotle Farms, and husband to one of the greatest humans to ever walk this planet, D. Riggs. As an active user of our community's recreational facilities and someone who has seen firsthand the positive impact that well-developed parks and recreation infrastructure can have, I urge the council to move forward with placing a Parks and Recs bond on the ballot sooner rather than later. A well-designed recreational facility serves all members of our community, regardless of age, background, or ability. From youth camps to senior water aerobics, these spaces provide opportunities for play, competition, and overall well-being. They foster connection, growth, and a shared sense of community. Growing up, I saw the power of these facilities firsthand. My dad oversaw the construction and operation of our community sports centers, and as kids, my friends and I always knew where the pickup games were, providing a healthy outlet for our energy and giving us a reason to stay out of trouble. It was a place where influential coaches had the ability to shape generations of young men and women. Through sports, we learned resilience, teamwork, and discipline. We learned to win and lose with grace. It created a culture around the passing on of life lessons. I was fortunate enough to play soccer at the United States Military Academy, and as future military leaders, we had to memorize General Douglas MacArthur's words, "Upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that on other days on other fields will bear the fruits of victory." His mantra encapsulates the immense benefits sports can bring to honing coaching and leadership skills, developing character and grit in a safe but competitive context. And General MacArthur's words reign true in the most extreme cases of leading soldiers in combat, but also more recently in leading diverse Mac Market teams through a global pandemic or the Chipotle team in the new insect farming industry. The skills learned on the fields of friendly strife are forever ingrained in my mind thanks to strong community leaders. Recreational facilities are equally valuable in adulthood. They provide spaces to connect with friends, colleagues, and friendly rivals. They offer stress relief and help build relationships across diverse communities. I witnessed this firsthand managing adult soccer teams, where players pay thousands per season to compete in leagues outside the area, primarily Portland and Salem. Many of these players come from our local Hispanic community. And when we step onto the field together, language barriers fade. The universal language of play, competition, and laughter brings us together. These facilities also have significant economic impact. I've heard Visit McMinnville emphasize the importance of athletic tourism. Investing in parks and recreation could drive visitors to our town, boosting hotels, restaurants, and local businesses. At Mac Market, we'd love to host traveling sports teams between games, fostering an even stronger connection between athletics and our economy. So I think the time to act is now. We can keep talking about it, we can be about it, and the latter will make our community a better place. So let's move forward and get something to the ballot. Thank you for your time and leadership.
Next, we have Matt Weinrich.
Hi, Matt Weinrich, McMinnville. I agree with the document submitted by the Friends of Quarry Park opposing development of a bike facility.
Next is Jackie Weinzenberger.
Hello, I'm Jackie Weisenberger from McMinnville. I would like to make a statement in regards to the document that was turned in by the Friends of Quarry Park, that I totally agree with that document, and that I greatly oppose the idea of turning that park into what I feel is a special interest group of a BMX bike park. I'm not against biking by any means. However, I think due to where that park is situated and what it has evolved into, is better off to be a nature preserve for a use for everybody to go to, not just a special interest group that, based on the way that is situated, would probably disrupt many of us that live right in the vicinity of that park. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Craig Weinrich.
Hello, my name's Craig Weinrich. I'm in McMinnville, Oregon. I agree with the document submitted by the Friends of the Quarry Park opposing the development of the bike sports facility in that area. Thank you.
Next, we have Valerie Anton.
Good evening, Valerie Anton. I live in McMinnville, and I also agree with the Friends of, to save Friends, Quarry Park from development. I just want to read a statement from their document. One of McMinnville Park's department's own goals is to, quote, protect natural resources, wildlife habitats, and tree canopy while fostering environmental stewardship and expanded water access, educational opportunities, and ways to experience nature. We respectfully request that Quarry Park be permanently designated as a green space only. And I also want to say that Ralph Wortman donated funds for this space not to be, the stipulation was that it was, by the state, was that it was not to be developed. And Kiwanis Park planted the trees that exist there. Many wildlife species reside there, and this is not suitable for a BMX, high-speed, dirt biking facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Muir, can you please follow up on that comment? Thank you.
We have Pearl Shan. And we're just about hitting our 4-minute mark.
Ms. Sham, I believe you're going to be the last comment tonight. If I can just make a comment to folks who may be here but won't get an opportunity to speak, please feel free to email the city staff and email any statements that you might have or attend the next meeting because we're at the end of time after your comments.
My name is Pearl Shan, and I live in McMinnville. I am here to support the Friends of Quarry Park project proposal in opposing a BMX facility at the park. Thank you.
I stand corrected. We have time for one more comment.
Steve Gossman.
Yes, my name is Steve Kosman. I'm here to oppose the idea of putting a bike path in Quarry Park. The residents out there, since I'm the last one, I'm going to speak a couple minutes since I'm the last person to get to speak. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, then I won't be. Then I'll speak more than just 30 seconds. The people that the Friends of Quarry Park, who are friends of mine, we all live around the park, in the area, in the neighborhood of the park. We clean that park up all the time. We pick up garbage. We pick up dog stuff after the people that don't pick up after their own dogs. We pick up paper cups. We pick up all kinds of stuff. The kids come out there. They have a good time. That's great. We love to have them. And I don't mind picking up after them. I don't mind picking up after the homeless because I think they need a spot once in a while to get out of the rain, and I'll do that. But what I don't want to do is see bicycles roaring down through the neighborhood off the side of the hill, and the ground under Quarry Park is rock. It's a quarry. The ground, the dirt there is about as thick as that, if you can see that. If you walk through Quarry Park, you will see rock. Every other step you take, you'll see a rock sticking up. If a tree falls over, the roots are wrapped in rock. So it's not a place for bicycles or things to tear up the ground. It's going to be a terrible disaster, and I really wish you guys would really consider squashing that idea and turn it into a park that's usable for everybody. Plant some more trees. Ask the friends of the park. We'd be glad to volunteer to come out and help plant, clean up, cut down trees, pick up trees that have fallen. The fire road fell a year ago. A log fell across the fire road. It was 2 months that nobody came out there. Nobody from the city, nobody from the Parks Department. Finally, I went out with my chainsaw and sawed the damn thing out of the way so the fire trucks could possibly get in there. So I want you to understand that people around that park value it, people in the community value it. I walk in it a lot. I see a lot of people, and I've met a lot of people, and they're all good people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who came and submitted comments. We greatly appreciate your participation. The next item on the agenda is advice and information items. We will start with reports from city councilors on committee and board assignments, and we will start to my right with Councilor Payne.
Thank you. First, Audit Committee is meeting on March 11th, so we'll have an update at the council meeting that occurs after that formal audit review. The Local Public Safety Coordinating Council hasn't met since our last council meeting, and the next meeting is scheduled for March 5th. Landscape Review I missed due to being ill. The Yamhill County Equity Action Work Group met and discussed emergency preparedness and how we can support the community in accessing information and tools related to emergency preparedness, specifically while confined to home. And then the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee met and got their public meeting training from City Attorney David Leitenberg. There was a lot of discussion around federal immigration policy and safety of meetings, and then the DEIAC is supporting the access of red cards, which are available at the library and the community center.
Thank you. Councilor Cunningham?
Yeah, so Historic Landmarks Committee just recently met, went over the application for the Hanley Oaks Apartments. This is specifically for the demolition of the Hanley homestead there. That's on Baker Creek at 411, I want to say. Obviously a historic resource for a community that has been let go for a very long time. And ultimately, through rigorous, rigorous debate as well, but ultimately it was determined that it would benefit our community to allow for the demolition, and in its place, there will be a certain amount of apartments built. What is currently proposed but not officially is 28 affordable home apartments on that property, and that's the developer's name, who is just an excellent guy, Nate Ball. He and his wife were the ones that redeveloped after just purchasing the apartments across from that on Hanley Lane that had the fire, and learned a ton, and are looking at bringing back the Hanley Oaks as another affordable housing opportunity, which is just absolutely fantastic. We also went over some applications for the ground and some adjustments to the new Humble Pub there, and I don't know 100%, but we pretty much had agreement on those adjustments. And then the housing production strategy meeting that we had kind of carried on the conversations that we had in the previous work session about the housing needs assessment. And then we have not had a meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee yet. That is tomorrow, I believe. And then MCM is not meeting until next month.
Thank you. On Zoom, Councilor Chenoweth?
Yeah, so MEVLC met, and we hammered out our goals, our target projects for the next year. Making the list, again, was the Innovation Campus, 3rd Street redesign, and we've added to that some focus on housing for the community, with a specific focus on Alpine Avenue street improvement area, as we believe that's going to open up the door for more housing in that area. We also have the airport master plan and land use is on our radar since that's right now in the works, and we want to make sure that it aligns well with what the innovation campus building is going to look like, or structure area is going to look like. And we also decided we wanted to have a post-evaluation of the grant money spending that we did over the last couple of years from the money that was given to us by the legislature through the work of Ron Noble, Representative Noble. The Parkway Committee also met, and you might have noticed now on the end of the bypass where it connects in Newburgh, some clearing starting to happen as they prepare for the interchange redesign that's going to take place where the bypass hits, what is that, 219? And so you'll start seeing that work. It's going to start in earnest shortly and should be completed early in 2027. For those of you who are aware of the funding issues that could potentially bring, all of the time-sensitive funding will be spent in time within the deadlines. That's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Geary?
Thank you. Let's see. Get organized here. Visit McMinnville. Had my first board meeting for Visit McMinnville that I was able to join. The topics included financial update and staffing updates, an update on the winter passport program of Flavors of the Foothills, update on some Travel Oregon grants, including the helping with the MDA's Art Alley Phase 2. Other projects, the gravel routes, Panther Creek, our Parks and Recreation Bond, pickleball tennis development, and Yamhill River access. The other report out was on the annual retreat and goal setting, and the goals of Visit McMinnville, and I think we're going to be hearing some of this in their annual reporting here come March, but return to the mission, vision, values as guiding principles, focus on the duties of a DMO, I know what that means now, develop a strategy for marketing McMinnville as a year-round destination, focus marketing campaigns for Civic markets, i.e. Seattle, with clear KPIs and reportable metrics. I don't know what that means. The financial stability, restore reserve funds, and pay off outstanding obligations. So get the financials under wraps and moving forward. Add value and understanding for Visit McMinnville for locals. Develop community cohesion and develop a unified voice for promoting McMinnville, and complete a new Visit McMinnville website. So my first meeting, a lot to listen, a lot to learn, and I hope next meeting to be the expert on all those things. Stormwater, wastewater, PAC, met on the 18th, so you heard a work session, and then we had met as a PAC again. The primarily focused a little bit on shaking off the rust, refreshing what we had, and secondarily, initially we had sort of the PAC in their policy recommendations to council had for lack of a better term, punted on what a tiered approach to a rate structure would be, being that we have time now to dive into that. They did do that. They descended into the particulars of what that would be, and that'll work its way through and come back to council as council asked and instructed to hear more of a tiered rate structure approach on how that stormwater utility assessment could be built. More discussion around the rate calculation, commercial versus residential rates, revenue requirements overall, and then a master plan update for those areas. One thing in the previous discussion from that PAC was a lot of things tied up to, well, let's wait till the master plan completes, let's wait till that master plan completes, and as that gets more and more complete, we're able to make more and more of those policy recommendations. So more to come on that, and then MURAC, no meeting since the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Tukolsky.
My committees have not met. Nothing to report.
Thank you. For my report, the Mid-Willamette Valley COGS annual dinner will take place Wednesday, March 5th at the Willamette Heritage Center in the Spinning Room. For For Planning Commission, there was discussion at the meeting about amending the water system master plan. That issue will come back to a future planning meeting. There was a request to extend a land use decision related to a minor partition change near a property at Redmond Hill. There was also a work session on land use efficiencies, which is a current step in the sequential urban growth boundary work plan. And this was a continuation of the joint conversation we had between council and the Planning Commission. I believe those efficiencies need to be adopted by March 1st, 2026, so those will come back to us. Finally, it was my honor to host Senator Merkley's town hall this past weekend. Thank you to Commissioner Kit Johnson, who's in attendance tonight, and Councilors Geary and Tukulski for attending. With that, we will go to department head reports. We'll start with City Manager Towery.
Thank you, Council President, members of council. I have no report tonight.
Thank you. Attorney Leitenberg?
Nothing from the legal department tonight. Thank you.
Planning Director Richards?
Yes, thank you, Council President and Councilors. Just to follow up on the Council President's comments, we did a work session with you on land use efficiencies. We didn't have enough time to get from you sort of any fatal flaws you might individually think of or things that we didn't think of that you would like us to analyze further. If you have those thoughts or comments, feel free to send them to us.
There's a question from Councilor Payne.
Thank you, Director Richards. I'm curious, just referring back to our packet, there was indication of potential follow-up from Garrett Scales Graffiti. So I just wonder if you have any new information on that.
I do. I've been working with our code compliance officer, who's also been working with our legal office to put together a response for the city manager to send to you as city council as to what our processes are for graffiti removal, and some of our thoughts on how we can move forward with programs and processes to make it a little bit less onerous to the property owner impacted.
Thank you. It's a complaint-driven process, and I would note that the testimony that Mr. Scales included in the City Council report included some graffiti and other issues related to city property, like signs and that type of thing. Is that something that will get addressed as a result of the complaint?
I think so, and I also know that David Renshaw is here in the audience. He visited with me earlier and said he could answer some questions about city facilities relative to the graffiti after that email came in.
So what was your specific question, sir?
Well, there were photos with graffiti on multiple city signs that Mr. Scales included with the report. I was just wondering if that would now get added to the department's queue for remediation.
Yes, sir. Actually, kind of a two-part answer. First of all, we've addressed all of our issues. So those were addressed on Friday when I became aware of the complaint. We sent our staff out and they took care of it right away. The short answer is it's a little bit tied to staffing levels and not be able to get things done as quick as we want. But the right answer is we probably didn't do as well as we could have. So we've made some course corrections with our staff, and we'll communicate that to young Mr. Scales when we get that opportunity. Photographs of the wooded areas, I've asked code enforcement to check in with Mr. Scales to identify those locations. I couldn't tell exactly where they were, so we'll follow up on those as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question?
There's a follow-up question, Mr. Renshaw.
Well, to whomever this should go to. When a citizen has a complaint of graffiti, what is the proper channel for them to go through?
So our code enforcement program is the program that deals with graffiti. It's considered a property nuisance. And then if it's on city facilities, we'll communicate with our city team. If it's on private facilities, we'll communicate with the property owner about it. And there's been, in the past, we have had volunteer programs that we've set up for people to go and eradicate graffiti in a certain area. So to be successful with graffiti remediation, it's important to do it quickly. It's also important to do it consistently. And then eventually, Second Street's a great example of this in terms of the linear fence along the pathway there that was getting tagged for a while there. And we had a volunteer group that was working on that and consistently getting out there and eradicating it quickly. And we were able to get it to a place where it hasn't been tagged in a while.
So sorry to interrupt. There's a code enforcement number.
Yeah, so on our website, there is, all you have to do is put in the search bar code enforcement, and it will come up with a comment form that you can fill out. There's also a phone number you can call, and we get forms and phone calls 24/7.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finance Director Henry?
Thank you very much. I have the pleasure to let you know that we have started in on the transparency software / new budget software. So those discussions are now in full force. We've done our first level of data validation, only for 23, but it's a first round, and that did go through well. We got that back to the consultants this afternoon. And so we are moving forward with those meetings. We are hopeful, but not positive, but hopeful to be able to possibly get a nice looking budget book out if everything goes smooth over the next few weeks in getting data in there. So this is a positive for us. Other than that, we are focused on budget. We have a budget amendment coming towards you on the 11th, I believe. We then have the overall budget, and I want to encourage any of you who would like to meet with me or who have any questions or any comments about what you would like to see in, or questions you have about the budget process or just about me in general, please feel free to set up some time with me. I do have a full schedule, but I keep my schedule open for everyone to see, so feel free to book time with me. I'd love to sit down and just talk with you and understand your priorities and talk with you about how the finance department can help you get the answers that you need in order to do your jobs well.
Thank you. A follow-up question from Counselor?
So the information that you've put into the software so far, and when you said 2023, that would allow us to look back at 2023 and use it to drill down. Is that kind of?
That's correct. So what we're doing is we're going back to 23 so that you can have some trends, so that we can do some graphing and things like that. I want to be able to create a dashboard for those who don't want to go down to the individual transaction level, but also I have it in there at the transaction level. So I've imported it at the transaction level so that we can dig down into the individual transactions themselves.
Ultimately, to give us the most power for this going forward, we have to have some of this history put into it so that we can see the trends. Thank you so much.
Correct.
Thank you. Parks Director Muir?
Thank you. I have nothing more to add that you haven't already heard tonight. So thank you for your time and all the conversations. Thank you.
HR Director Hedges?
I just want to report tonight that we have posted the Parks and Rec Director position. We're accepting applications through March 9th.
City Recorder Cisneros?
Nothing for the council. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to the consent agenda. There's one item on the consent agenda this evening. Does any councilor request to have that item removed from the consent agenda and heard at its regular place? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a first from Councilor Geary and a second from Councilor Payne. Claudia, can you please poll the council?
Councillor Cunningham?
Aye.
Councillor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Councillor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Councillor Payne?
Aye.
Councillor Geary?
Aye.
And Council President Peralta?
Aye. The consent agenda has passed unanimously. I will now adjourn the City Council meeting at 7:54. I'd like to now call to order the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Excuse me, this says it's consent agenda, but I'm not sure if that's accurate. Okay. First item on the agenda is a resolution. We will be considering resolution number 2025-01, a resolution of the McMinnville Urban Renewal Board approving the annual financial report for the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency for fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2024, per Oregon Revised Statute 457.460. I would like to now call on Heather Richards to present.
Yes, thank you, Council President. This is an annual financial report, which is different from your other annual financial reports that we have to do for the Urban Renewal Agency. This one is actually embedded in the Urban Renewal state law. It's a report that we do that reports on revenue and expenses and maximum indebtedness and impact to overlapping taxing districts. And we publish it at the end of February and send it to the overlapping taxing districts. We put this together. It already went to the McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee for their review and their recommendation to you. So you have a copy of the report as part of your staff report. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights of it for you. And then also at this time of the year when I bring this to you, I share with you what the McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee's strategic plan is for the next year and their budget proposal to you. So it's our opportunity to sort of give you the annual financial report and then next year's sort of outlook. So it's for fiscal year ending in 2024, so that's June 30, 2024. We look at money received. On this particular table, usually what is of interest to people is the property taxes received because that's showing how our increment is growing in the district. And then we also have property assistance, and we'll go through that a little bit. So we do have some loans and grants out there. The loans are on repayments. Grants get paid back if the property sells within 5 years of receiving the grant. So that program does receive some income, and then we have interest income earned on the funds as well. This is a separate fund for the city, so it operates internally within itself. So as it collects funds, those funds move into the next year if not expended. We also show our expenses each year in this report and the projects that we have spent it on. So if you remember, we have a certain list of projects, and that's what we can spend urban renewal funds on and not other projects. And so we're always reporting on how we're moving those projects forward and the expenses into them. We also have to report on our long-term bond obligations. So typically urban renewal is a bonded program where you bond for projects and invest in them early so that they're incentivizing reinvestment in the area and tax base to pay back the bond. We have one bond right now, one bond obligation, and that was for phase 1 of Alpine Avenue. We also have to report on maximum indebtedness. So this is the cap of the amount of money that we can use to fund that bonded debt or pay-as-you-go programs within the program as well. So any sort of expenses we put into a project in an annual year that is not bonded debt. And so you'll see from this is we're still a fairly young program. We have a $30 million of maximum indebtedness, and we've spent about $3.5 million of that. So we have about $26.5 million remaining. And then we report on the impact on taxing districts. So this is sort of what we call revenue foregone. To remind you, when we established the district, all taxes paid at the time of establishing districts to all the different taxing districts in that area continue to be paid. So there's still money flowing to all these taxing districts, but any additional tax accumulated after we've established the district goes to the agency. And so that's what we call the foregone rate. And that's what we report on. We will next year be putting the McMinnville Fire District into this list as well. So that's the annual report. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, and then I'll go into the strategic plan and the proposed budget.
Do we have any questions from council?
I had a question just on point of order, Council President. I didn't see this posted on the website. So I don't know if we're in violation of, it's not currently posted there, so I don't know if we're in violation of public meeting laws or not.
For what part of it?
This part of the meeting.
It is. It's under the Urban Renewal Agency tab. So you have to
I mean, it's on our city front webpage, but if you're just specifically looking at council, it doesn't come up as a council meeting because this is an urban renewal agency.
I think that's where the confusion lies. Thank you.
Yeah, I see the packet.
Thank you.
We also have noticed this in the paper, so it got noticed in the paper on Friday. It will get noticed in the paper tomorrow and on Friday as well, to let people know that we have this report for them. So in terms of the fiscal year 2025-26 strategic plan and proposed budget, the urban renewal plan has sort of the baker's dozen projects, so 13 projects in total that we can fund. It says how much we can put into those projects based on 2013 present year dollars. We can escalate that via an inflationary rate to when we actually build the project, as an estimated time frame for the project as well. So this is what we use to sort of implement the program. And several of those projects actually were captured in the transportation general obligation bond that was passed here in this community. So those have already been taken care of. And then I provide a status report on where we're at on the other projects that are in the plan. We do a little dashboard with the advisory committee, so I wanted to share that with you. It tells us how much we've spent on each project and when. This is the first dashboard that shows what we've collected in property taxes since the district was first established. So the first year of the district, we collected $82,000. That's that increment, the number that was above the established number. And then last year we collected $702,000. So that shows how it's grown over time. And we've collected about $3.5 million thus far, which is very similar to how much we have spent in our maximum indebtedness. Wanted to share with you what that means in terms of our forecasting. Many of you are familiar with this, but when you put together an urban renewal plan, you have to put together a forecast for it to show that you can actually fund your projects. And you do it based on what you expect the growth to be in the urban renewal district, and that's based on redevelopment opportunities on the different properties. So when the urban renewal plan was originally envisioned by the city and put together, we had a low growth scenario and a medium growth scenario that we established for what we thought the forecast would be. And you can see what that is per year on there. We then adopted another scenario that was when we adopted the report, which sat between those two. So at some point in time since 2012 and when we adopted the report in 2014, we made a decision that neither of those scenarios really reflected what we thought would happen, and we would sit somewhere in the middle. Then when we did the Alpine Avenue bond in 2017, we did another forecasting because we wanted to understand when would we be able to bond for the next big project, which is the 3rd Street Improvement Project. And we recast it a little bit because it was not achieving the same growth that we had originally expected in that report from 2014. And so if you look at our actuals, they're very close to what that city, what I call the city reset after the bond, the 2017 forecast. So we're tracking along with that, which is good because that is actually what MURAC looks at when they're talking about their strategic plan and how to start building towards these larger improvement projects like the 3rd Street Improvement Project. So they've used that city reset forecast to calendar out when we can actually bond for the 3rd Street Improvement Project and when to start working on that. The Property Assistance Program is the program we have funded every year. This is an opportunity to partner with private in development and investment, so it's creating tax base, which is what we want to see, and creating jobs. We have a property assistance program that works in 2 ways. We provide grants and we also provide loans, and as I said, it's actually generating income. The purpose behind this program is eventually have a revolving fund program here where it's paying for itself and you can bring the money back and put it back out into the district to continue to incentivize reinvestment. So it's good to see that happening. I'd like to see that happen a little bit more aggressively, but it's good to see that it is happening. In terms of parking, usually my story behind this is we only have $1 million established out of the $30 million for parking, which is interesting to me. And we've used that mostly for studies at this point in time, and then also to improve the First Presbyterian Church parking lot, which we use for downtown parking when they're not using it for their church facilities. The Third Street Improvement Project is our next big development project that we've been working on, and thus far we have spent $275,000 on that project. And as you know, we're continuing to leverage the urban renewal funds towards other funds. So city ARPA funds was leveraged into it, and then just recently our $850,000 federal earmark that we received to continue to do the construction documents for that project. The Alpine Avenue project has about $5.3 million in it from the 2013 dollars. So you can escalate that forward. It's probably about $8 million at this point. And we did phase 1 for that. So we are now in discussions about phase 2 and what does that look like, which would be from 11th Street to 14th Street, and the opportunity to incentivize redevelopment of those properties sort of on the northern end of Alpine Avenue. We generate interest on the fund, and interest proceeds are interesting because they're a little bit more flexible on how you can spend them outside of the maximum indebtedness. So a lot of programs will use a lot of agencies will use these funds for sort of program money as well. We're just keeping track of it so that we can understand that. We haven't actually invested these in any sort of program development yet. This will probably be where we'll find funding to do our business resiliency program support associated with the Third Street Improvement Project. So what do we need to do as a community to bring in expertise to help our businesses on Third Street prepare for resiliency during the construction project? And are these funds something that we can use to help underwrite that? So MIREC operates from a 5-year strategic plan because these are big projects that they're developing over time. They have focused on the development assistance, the Third Street Improvement Project. Recently, we've had discussions about updating the downtown master plan. As you know, that got stalled out a little bit as we were trying to staff up the planning team again. We're at full staff now, so I'm happy to say we're working on that draft RFQ right now to get that out. We've also added the Northwest Rubber site to the strategic plan in the last couple of years, and then housing specifically has been called out as a piece in the strategic plan too. The housing development piece is under the property assistance program. So that is, how do we set aside money on that property assistance side where we say we're as an agency saying we're setting this aside to incentivize the development of housing in the district because we have not yet achieved that in the district in terms of new housing starts. Councilor Cunningham.
Yeah, the public parking, implement parking management and garage improvements only has a checkbox for 2023. Is there intent going forward to continuing to improve that parking garage because it needs a lot of love?
Yeah, there's been discussion about maintenance of the parking garage and whether to expend urban renewal funds on that maintenance or find other funds for the maintenance. With such limited money in the parking project, the question has been where's the best place to leverage that money? And I think that will be a near-term discussion because I know it's come up internally at the city, the need for the parking garage. But quite frankly, we haven't brought it into the urban renewal discussion that much yet.
Okay.
I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Any other questions at this point, Council? No? Okay.
And then my last slide, this is the budget proposal. So this is the Heather Richards budget management slide that will drive Katie Henry nuts. But all those little red arrows are, oh, we didn't expend it that year, so we're rolling it over to the next year. That's what that means. And then in parens is the amount of money that we're rolling over. So for fiscal year 25-26, we are proposing to budget $240,000 into that fiscal year, $140,000 of that being rolled into it as we straddle some of our, that project's taken a little longer in terms of the 30% construction docs, and then we also want to be able to leverage with that $850,000 to finish the project. We always carry district identity in there. That's a project for wayfinding and rooftop lights. We were waiting for staff capacity again to move that forward. I hope we can do that this year. We've had staff transition in both the MDA as well as my team, and so it just hasn't been an appropriate time to actually try and pull that off. But we've carried that every year as a potential project. The downtown master plan we're moving forward with, as I shared with you. And then property acquisition, this is the Northwest Rubber site. So we do have a property acquisition as one of our projects. And in this next year, we expect that we have our proposals in. We'll actually receive them last week. And we're reviewing them, and the subcommittee's getting together to make some recommendations. We expect to choose a final proposer here in the next week or next couple of weeks and make a recommendation up to you. And then we expect to enter into an MOU and a development agreement with the proposer. And so we're still having some holding time on the property. We're still paying our monthly interest on that. And there may be a need for, we have a contract with Leland Consulting to help us understand what the proposals means in terms of the terms and the payback to the public in terms of what it means for tax base and return on the investment and things like that. So that $350,000 isn't just the holding costs, it's also the costs associated with doing some of the analysis of the proposals, putting the development agreement together, and then we have monthly security and utility costs on the property. So that's what that's for. And that's my report for you tonight. Oh, I did want to share with you Alpine Avenue. I did say that we are starting to look at Phase 2 a little bit more. So Alpine Avenue is the spine of the Northeast Gateway District. As you recall, it was a gravel road, and we did 4 blocks initially, and there's 4 blocks left to do. We are right now in the process of, with the Northwest Rubber site coming under development, and the proposals are have a lot of great activity associated with them in terms of housing and commercial space. We think that the rest of Alpine Avenue is going to have a lot of demand on it, and we need to look at improving the rest of it. And we're also seeing a lot of interest in that area of the district as well. So we are working with our federal legislatures to try and get a earmark to help us do the design for the rest of Alpine Avenue, and then take those urban renewal funds that are remaining to do the remaining construction for it. And we'll have to balance that in the 3rd Street Improvement Project in terms of how our team can manage which project when and make some decisions about that. But we are starting to think about the second phase of Alpine Avenue and how to start moving that forward. And that's my last slide.
Thank you, Director Richards. Do we have any council questions for the director? Councilor Chenoweth online, any questions?
No, sir. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. With that, I will adjourn the McMinnville Urban Renewal.
We need a.
Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. We actually need to vote on the resolution. Okay. Can I get a motion to consider resolution number 2025-01?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilor Tukolsky and seconded by Councilor Cunningham. Is there any discussion on the motion? Claudia, can you please poll the council?
Counselor Cunningham?
Aye.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Yes, ma'am.
Counselor Payne?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
And Council President Peralta?
Aye. The resolution has passed unanimously, and I will now adjourn the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency meeting at 8:13 p.m.